Let's have a quick listen now to our panellists as they sum up and give us a little bit of an overview of their perspectives on this topic. And perhaps we could start with you, Michael.
Thank you very much. You know, when we start off looking around the world, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of this problem. We could spend the whole evening listing and discussing the manifestations of violence against women, physical, sexual, in the context of war, trafficking, and on and on and on. It would all be true. But there's another truth that I think it's really important that we also hang on to. And that is, in a sense, we're not here tonight because of this problem of violence against women. I actually believe we're here together because we collectively are in the process of ending this problem of men's violence against women. And so I think that our starting point, in a sense, isn't just the problem, but the fact that around the world there are movements led by women to bring this problem to an end. Now, the problem from my point of view, one problem from my point of view, has been that women have had to stand alone. And in a sense, we've left out a key word. You know, often we'll use the shorthand, violence against women. And in doing that, we're leaving out the key adjective, which is who's committing that violence. And of course, it's being committed by men. It's men's violence against women. It's not all men. In fact, it's not most men in most countries. It is a significant minority of men. But if we leave out that word, then we continue to define it only as a women's issue. It gets men off the hook. Not just the men who commit the violence, but those millions and millions and millions of others who have stood in silence. Now, that would be a problem for any group, for any half of the population to stand in silence. But the problem is when that half has disproportionate social power. When the half who has been silent controls our parliaments, makes the laws, enforces the laws, or the judges and the police, control our religious institutions, control our media, and so forth. If that half has been silent, then we are allowing the violence to continue. Women have stood alone for too long. Women in many countries have risked their lives to work to end violence against women. And finally, in countries around the world, we see men ending their silence. So what led to the formation of the White Ribbon Campaign 19 years ago now was a couple friends, their spouses, their partners, said to them, okay, you guys, you're not using violence, but why are you silent? And they approached me and came up with this idea for a campaign, not just for a few men to speak out, but really to try to develop a vehicle for men in our millions to raise our voices, to end our silence, to think about our own attitudes, our own behavior, but also to challenge the men and boys around us. I can talk more a bit later about some of the characters of that campaign, but the spirit really is one of that women should not be standing alone, that men have got to raise our voices. And the good news, I think, is that if we look back 30 years ago, when these issues weren't even discussed in the media in most countries. If we look back 30 years ago, and few countries had laws around violence against women. If we look back 20 years ago, whatever, and when there were laws, they weren't implemented. We look back, and there were very few shelters in most countries for women to go to escape abusive relationships. There was nothing in the way of efforts to reach out to men. I think we were making incredible progress, led by women, and now joined by more and more men. So even though we're here, to discuss an incredibly heavy topic, even though we're here to, it's the worst. And yet, I think that what I would hope is that tonight we can carry through it a spirit of hope and possibility.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Before we leave you, though, I'm really interested to know...
I thought I'd get off the hook that...
No, not yet. I'm really interested to know why you're involved in this personally. What is it about you? Why Michael Kaufman?
I think it came out of different things. It came out of growing up in a family where my parents were strong believers in equality. I have 4 sisters, and I grew up without any knowledge that such a thing could be happening in the world. I have a loving and gentle dad and strong and loving, gentle, had a strong and gentle, loving mother. And so it was beyond my imagination that people could, that such a thing existed. Brought up with strong beliefs in equality. And actually for me, I think for me, some of the transformational things was when I was a kid living down in the southern US in the early 60s, near the beginning of the civil rights movement. And in the case of my family, when we moved down there, my parents said, we're not going to go eat in any restaurants. Everything was segregated, different for whites and blacks. And they said, we're not going to go to those restaurants. Michael, you don't get to go to movies with your friends. And as a little kid, 12 years old, it feels like a bit of a rip-off at first. Why don't I get to do these things when my friends get to? And my parents were really clear. They said, as long as some people don't get to do those things, whether it's go to a movie or eat in a restaurant, then you shouldn't either. And so for me, I was raised with a value that as an individual, I have to speak out if I see injustice. And so, like many in Canada, our lives were turned around by the murder of 14 women in 1989, 14 students by a man who hated women, hated feminism, and murdered women, and really launched a moment that launched a national debate in Canada about violence against women. And finally, some of us realized we better start doing something. We better start speaking out.
Good for you.
Thank you. Can I just interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
And I appreciate the genuineness of what you just said. Good for you. But
no, really, I was sincere.
And
I did mean good for you.
No, I know. But what I do want to say, and not to embarrass you for saying that, because I appreciate it and all that. But you know what? I think I think our attitude should be towards men. Well, what took you guys so long? It's like, yeah, great you're doing this, but not to lose sight that the real pioneers of this work have been women. But that much said, thank you.
Thanks for that. That's great. Panya, you'd have your own unique perspectives on all this. What do you see as the important issues?
We have been working with the community people in the rural area in Cambodia, especially with women from the poor family for more than 20 years. And we hear almost every day the issue of domestic violence, sexual rape, or from the women as well as the young girls. And they face many difficulties, like one, as you mentioned, we do not have a really enough safe place or assistance service available for these people who need support. And we see that violence against women is also happening in both in the less development country and also as well as the more developed country as yours. And we also see that it's not just our responsibility as a women to work with women to stop violence. It's important we as the women and also the men to work together and take responsibility to contribute to this, to address the violence against women. Because it's not just about the family matter, it's about our society. So we see that it's important for everyone to share your responsibility to talk about violence against women. And I see this opportunity is a great one for us to discuss. And especially from me, from another part of the world, to be here, to hear your experience and to share our experience as well. Yeah.
Panya, I think you're right. I think it is a universal issue. It's in every country. Tell us about some examples of your own experiences, though.
The experience, the story that we hear from the women, often is about the conflict in the family, especially for the women. Just start from the small stuff, even the wife could not cook the good food for the husband just throw everything out of the house, beat the wife seriously. And also the other issue, the brother or the father rape the young girls in the house. It's also another issue that we face. And often this issue leads to the negative impact to the livelihood situation in the family as well as the poor education for the children.
We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the education of the children later, because I think that's a really important point, and maybe it's the starting point, but we'll hear more about that in a little while.